The first time I noticed her, really noticed her, it was nothing dramatic. Just a quiet Tuesday morning in the laundromat 2 blocks from my place. The machines hummed, a low steady rhythm that filled the silence between strangers. I was folding a stack of worn t-shirts, same way I always did, half distracted, corners never lining up quite right. That's when I caught her reflection in the glass door of the dryer. Mid-40s maybe, hair tucked behind one ear, waiting on a wash cycle with a paperback open in her lap. Most people looked restless in that place, checking their phones, tapping feet, sighing when a machine beeped. She didn't. She sat still, like she had time to spare, like the waiting wasn't wasted on her. The second time I saw her, she remembered me. Or maybe she just remembered my clumsy way of wrestling socks into the dryer. She said, almost under her breath, "You're the one who folds fast but never even." It took me a beat to realize she was teasing. I laughed, but it came out short, like I didn't know how. "Guess I'm not built for precision," I said. She smiled without lifting her eyes from the book, and I carried that expression with me the rest of the day. That became a pattern. Her there some mornings, me pretending I had more laundry than usual. I never said it out loud, but those quiet, ordinary moments started pulling me in. It wasn't about what she wore, or even the way she looked, it was the way she paused before answering, like she considered her words carefully. The way she tucked her hands under her arms when the room was too cold. I started to look forward to small things. Her noticing if I changed my coffee brand, the way she'd glance up when the machine clicked shut, as if to mark the sound together. And me? I was 23 and pretending to have it figured out. Truth was, most days ended the same way, an unsent text sitting in my drafts, half-written messages to people I didn't have the nerve to send. I'd stay up too late, scrolling through conversations I'd abandoned halfway, then fall asleep with my phone still in my hand. But with her, the silence didn't feel like failure. It felt full. One morning, I misjudged the spin cycle and spilled half my basket onto the floor. Socks, shirts, everything scattering like I'd dropped my whole life in front of her. I crouched down, embarrassed, and she bent too, hand brushing against mine as we both reached for the same shirt. Neither of us said anything right away. Her eyes flicked toward me, then down to the shirt, then back to her book as she stood. That tiny moment, it shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. Later that week, a friend asked why I bothered with these early mornings at the laundromat when I had machines in the building. I didn't answer him directly. All I said was, "Why help him?" That was his question. And mine was simpler. Because she once saved me. Not with anything big. Not with words. But with presence. That night, for the first time, she sent a text. Just one line. "You left a shirt behind." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, heart heavier than it should have been for a single sentence. And I wondered, did she mean the shirt, or did she mean something else? The next time we spoke outside the laundromat, it wasn't planned. I just picked up takeout, balancing the bag awkwardly in one hand, when I saw her sitting on the front steps of the building across from mine. She had a mug of tea cupped in her hands, steam rising into the cool evening air. It was late enough that the street was mostly quiet, just the hum of passing cars and the buzz of a flickering street lamp. "You don't strike me as the type who orders takeout alone," she said, not looking at me, just blowing across the rim of her mug. I stopped at the base of the steps, not sure if I should stay. "Guess I am," I said. "It's kind of pathetic, huh?" She shook her head. "Not pathetic. Just familiar." Something about the way she said that, soft, but weighted, made me sit down a step below her, food bag resting against my knee. For a while we didn't talk. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Finally I asked, "So, familiar how?" She glanced down at her tea, like she hadn't meant to say it out loud. Then, after a pause, "After my divorce, there were nights when I'd eat cold noodles straight from the container. No reason to set the table. No one waiting on me. That kind of familiar." I didn't know what to say. She said it like it was just a fact, but it landed heavier than that. I thought about how my friends still joked about me being the youngest in the group, how they couldn't imagine living alone yet. But here she was, carrying years of solitude that I couldn't even picture. I wanted to tell her something honest in return, so I said the first thing that came. I used to imagine I'd always have someone sitting across from me. Like my mom, I guess. She hated eating alone. She'd even set an extra plate when I was a kid, like pretending made it easier. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. And does it? I shrugged. Sometimes. Other times it just makes the empty chair louder. That earned a faint smile, and then we were quiet again. I don't know when it shifted, but suddenly the air between us felt sharper. The age difference, the invisible lines I hadn't thought too hard about until now, it all pressed in at once. My mind kept running ahead, imagining what people would say if they saw us like this. Her mid-40s, sipping tea on her stoop. Me, 23, sitting one step lower, like a kid playing grown-up. I almost stood to leave, but then she shifted slightly closer, holding out her mug. Try it, she said. Too much honey, but it works. I wrapped my hands around the cup, felt the lingering warmth from her fingers. Took a sip. It was sweeter than I expected, almost cloying, but I nodded anyway. It's good, I said. She looked at me then, really looked, eyes steady, no smile this time. Just a gaze that held a question neither of us voiced. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. It was supposed to be just another morning. I walked into the laundromat, basket under one arm, only to see her already there. Not unusual, but this time, she wasn't alone. A woman about my age sat beside her, chatting like they knew each other well. They laughed quietly at something, their voices weaving above the low churn of the machines. I froze halfway to the washers, suddenly unsure where to look. She noticed me. Just a quick flick of her eyes, then back to her friend. Nothing more. I chose the farthest machine, dropped in my clothes without sorting. My hands felt clumsy, too loud against the metal. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her lean in to say something, lips curving around words I couldn't hear. For the first time since this whole thing started, I felt like an intruder. Later that evening, I found myself lingering outside her building again, take-out bag still warm in my hand. I almost kept walking. Almost. Then her door opened. She stepped out, cardigan wrapped loosely around her, hair still damp like she just showered. She stopped when she saw me. "Twice in one day," she said softly. I held up the bag, suddenly aware of how ridiculous I must look. Didn't want to eat alone again. A pause. Then she sighed, moved aside and said, "Fine. Come in. But no judging my kitchen." Inside, it was quiet except for the ticking clock on the counter. She poured tea again, sliding a cup toward me without asking. I set the takeout between us, trying not to notice how close her hand came to mine. She asked about school, about work, small, polite questions. But her eyes kept drifting, like she was searching for something else. I wanted to tell her about the morning. About how I hated seeing her laugh with someone my age, because it reminded me she could belong anywhere, whereas I only seemed to belong here, in these stolen silences with her. But I didn't say it. Instead, I asked, "So, your friend earlier?" Her eyes flicked up, sharp for a second, then softened. "My niece. She's staying a few days." Relief rushed through me too fast, too obvious. I looked down at my cup, hoping she hadn't seen it in my face. The conversation thinned after that. We sat in half-light, the takeout forgotten. Every so often, my knee brushed the edge of her chair. She didn't move it away. I caught myself watching her hands, resting lightly on the table, fingertips tapping once, twice, then still. I wanted to reach across, to close the space between us. The thought came so strong it startled me. She must have felt it too, because she shifted slightly closer, eyes flicking to mine. The silence pressed in, heavy, expectant. I leaned forward. Just enough that her breath brushed my cheek. Then she pulled back. Not far, just enough. "You should go," she whispered. The clock ticked louder. My throat ached with all the things I didn't say. It was late afternoon when I found her sitting on the park bench near the corner store. Same cardigan, same stillness, though this time she wasn't reading. Just staring at the street, like she was waiting for something that hadn't come. I almost walked past. Almost. But she looked up right then, and the faintest shift in her expression, like she was tired of being alone, made me stop. I sat down beside her, not too close, not too far. She didn't look at me. You've been quiet, I said. My voice came out lower than I meant. She breathed out a laugh, thin and humorless. Maybe I've been thinking too much. I waited. When she didn't go on, I said, About what? Her hands twisted in her lap. About this. A tiny motion between us, barely a flick of her fingers, but it was enough. It's not fair. The words stung, though she hadn't said them sharply. Just tired. Not fair to who? I asked. Her lips pressed together, then parted, then pressed again. Finally. To you. To me. I don't even know. The silence after stretched, filled with the shuffle of leaves and the beep of a car backing up somewhere behind us. I wanted to say something steady, something that would make her stay here with me. But all I had was truth. I don't care if it's fair, I said. Too quickly, almost clumsy. I cut myself off, teeth catching the rest. Her head turned then, eyes sharp, searching. You just what? I couldn't answer. My chest felt too small for it. She looked away again, down at her hands. You're 23, she said quietly. You should be falling in love with someone who hasn't already. She trailed off, shaking her head. Already what? Her throat moved, but no sound came out. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The air grew heavy with all the words unsaid. I tried to picture what this looked like from the outside, a young guy and an older woman sitting on a park bench, not touching, not smiling. To strangers, it would mean nothing. To me, it felt like standing at the edge of something too steep. Finally, she said, almost to herself, I'm scared of what this could turn into. I swallowed hard. My hand twitched against the bench, almost reaching for hers. Almost. I'm scared of what it already is, I admitted. She flinched like I'd touched her, even though I hadn't. The air between us tightened, charged. Her eyes finally lifted, and for a second, they didn't hold back. There was no neighborly calm, no teasing distance, just raw, unguarded wanting. And then, softer than a breath, What are we doing? The question hung there, heavier than anything either of us could answer. After that day on the bench, she disappeared. Not gone entirely. Her door still opened and shut at familiar hours, the smell of coffee still drifted into the hall in the mornings, but she stopped showing up at the laundromat. No more tea on the stoop, no more quiet moments waiting for machines to click off. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. People change routines. Maybe her niece had stayed longer. Maybe she was traveling. But the silence stretched, and every morning I found myself looking across the street, waiting for something small, a wave, a glance, anything. Nothing came. I tried once, knocking lightly on her door with some excuse about a misdelivered flyer. She opened it just a crack, hair tied back, eyes tired. Thanks, she said quickly, and the door closed again before I could think of what else to say. It wasn't anger. It wasn't cold. It was retreat. A week later, I ran into someone who filled in what she hadn't. My friend's voice was casual, almost careless. Did you know she's got a kid? College age, I think. Must be weird, him being almost your age. I laughed it off, but inside something shifted. A son. Or a daughter. Someone my age. Suddenly the gap between us felt wider, less like years and more like a canyon. I imagined sitting at her table while her kid came home for the weekend, me fumbling for conversation, her eyes darting between us, everything we hadn't said dragged into the light. Maybe that was the line she couldn't cross. Still, I kept catching myself replaying the bench, her voice saying, What are we doing? Not accusing. Not dismissing. Just exposed. Like she wanted me to answer for both of us. But I hadn't. And now maybe she'd decided that silence was answer enough. One night, restless, I typed out a message. I don't know if I should have said something that day. But I can't stop thinking about it. I stared at the words, thumb hovering over send. The screen glowed in the dark, my chest tightening the longer I held it. I thought about what it would mean if she didn't reply. Or worse, if she did, with something final. I locked my phone without sending. The message stayed in drafts, like all the others. The next morning, I walked past the laundromat and saw her inside. She was folding clothes, head bowed, moving slowly like she was deliberately stretching out the task. I almost went in. Hand on the glass door, ready to push. But I didn't. I stood there long enough for her to look up and notice me through the window. For our eyes to meet, hold, then break. And then I kept walking. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It happened on a Tuesday, same as it started. I was unlocking my door when hers opened across the hall. For a second, we just stood there, me with my keys still in the lock, her holding a grocery bag that looked heavier than it should. Need help? I asked. Her first instinct was to shake her head, but then she hesitated. Maybe just to the kitchen. So I followed her in. The place was the same, books stacked on the counter, the hum of the old fridge. I set the bag down, not sure if I should leave right after. She lingered by the sink, untying the knot in the plastic bag slower than necessary. Finally she said, "I've been avoiding you." The honesty hit harder than if she'd denied it. "I notice," I said. Her hand stilled. "It's not because I wanted to. It's because I didn't know how not to." The words sat between us, fragile and raw. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms just to keep from fidgeting. "You don't have to explain," I murmured. "Yes, I do." She looked up now, eyes sharp but tired. "You're too young." "I'm too." She trailed off, shaking her head. "And I have a son. 21. Practically your peer." "You see how I know," I cut in. Too quick, but I couldn't hold it back. "I know it doesn't make sense. But that doesn't stop it from being real." The room went still again. Only the clock ticked. Her eyes softened, then narrowed, like she was weighing the risk of every word. "Do you understand what you're asking me to carry? The whispers? The looks? The part where people will think I've lost my mind?" I swallowed hard. "Do you understand what it's like to finally feel seen and have to pretend it doesn't matter?" That stopped her. Her shoulders lowered, her hand gripping the counter's edge like it was the only steady thing. We didn't move for a long while. I thought maybe that was the end, that she'd tell me to go, that we'd never speak like this again. But then she let out a breath, small and breaking. "I don't know if I can give you what you think you want." "I don't know either," I admitted. My throat ached as I said it. "But I know I don't want to keep pretending." Something shifted then. Not a dramatic change, not a flood of words. Just a quiet surrender in the way she finally stepped closer, her hand brushing mine as if testing whether the world would fall apart if we touched. It didn't. She didn't look at me when she whispered, "Okay." And somehow, that one word felt heavier than any confession could have. Time didn't stop after that day in her kitchen. It never does. But something shifted. Quietly. We didn't fall into a romance. There weren't midnight confessions or sudden kisses in the rain. It was smaller than that, slower. Like two clocks that finally found the same rhythm. She kept her routines, tea at night, folding clothes with more care than necessary. I kept mine, late walks, coffee I never bothered to sweeten. But more often, those routines overlapped. Sometimes I'd find her on the bench outside at dusk. I'd sit, one step lower, the way I always had. She'd bring tea, too much honey. I'd bring coffee, bitter as ever. We'd trade cups halfway through without saying why. And mornings? Sometimes I'd see her at 8:47 sharp, leaving her apartment for work. She'd glance across the hall, catch my eye, and it was enough. One evening, months later, I caught myself thinking back to the beginning, the laundromat, her teasing about my folding. I mentioned it to her in passing. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You still fold crooked," she said. I grinned. "And you still notice." It wasn't love declared. It was love lived. There were still doubts. She worried about her son finding out, about neighbors whispering. I worried about being too young, too unfinished. But the difference now was, we worried together. We let the silence carry what words couldn't. On the hard days, when life pressed too heavy, we'd find our way back to that bench. No speeches. Just presence. I think that's what she gave me most, the sense that being seen didn't need to be dramatic. It could be as ordinary as two mugs left cooling on a table. The last time we sat there, a little cold creeping in with the season, she reached over and tugged the sleeve of my sweater straight. A simple gesture. But in it was everything: acceptance, care, the quiet decision to stay. I didn't need her to say the words. Neither did she. Because by then, we both knew. And it was enough. I didn't feel heartbroken anymore. I didn't feel paused. I felt like the sentence had finally found its ending. Not with an exclamation point. Just a period. Quiet. Certain. Us. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?